Welcome to AECVC's latest thesis. Who hasn't heard the term software as a service or SaaS in this world? Almost anyone, right? It's been the defining term for the last 10 to 20 years within venture. However, within architecture, engineering, construction, and supply chains, AECS, we don't think that SaaS is the only way or even the most exciting way to build generational companies. I think it's outcome as a service companies who later transition to service as a product company. So in this episode, I'm going to share with you what it means to be building a venture within AECS that dedicates to the outcome as a service model. And you will see that you can actually achieve excellent, efficient distribution motions. You can achieve 80 to 90% plus gross margins, and you can achieve and prove early net profitability with exceptional cash flows. Not something that many people would say of an enterprise SaaS company within AECS in its early years. So stay tuned and listen how it works. I'm going to share my framework with you. Hey guys, welcome to this week's AECVC. This week we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to my partner Shubs and my heart, which we call outcome as a service. Outcome as a service, we coined the term years ago, but we first spoke publicly about it in a recent episode on Practical Nerds. The Practical Nerds episode explained how we think in terms of a framework between software as a service, outcome as a service, and then transitioning to service as a product in the context of the architecture, engineering, construction, and supply chain, AECS, industries. And the reason why that matters is because services are the norm in AECS. The reason why they are the norm is relatively intuitive to insiders, but perhaps more hidden to outsiders. They are the norm because projects within AECS are the norm. And within these projects, those who manage the projects take an exceptional amount of risk. They deliver against a specific timeline, against usually a fixed price offer, and thus the budget is fixed, actually in parts years before you actually execute the project. And with this timeline, with this quality, with this budget, you're operating within a project context, the risk of actually failing to deliver. And that means that when you purchase services within this project environment, you rely on people that you know. You rely on suppliers that have a proven track record, ideally with you, or perhaps with someone that you respect, to deliver the outcome that you require in order for you to honor your contract. And that reduces risk. Whereas if I'm going to offer you not the outcome, and I don't guarantee the outcome, and I don't offer that as a service, and I don't have the track record, well, I find it more difficult to sell into the AECS industry. And that is the main difference to software as a service, or short SaaS, right? So in SaaS, if you think of SaaS versus outcome as a service along these lines on the screen, you will see 4 different attributes, and they are more than that, but I've dumbed it down for this episode, that will differentiate SaaS to outcome as a service. The first one is, what is actually the value that I'm delivering into someone that runs a project in AECS? Well, in SaaS, it's a tooling. I don't guarantee you an outcome, but in outcome as a service, that's exactly what I'm guaranteeing you. I'm guaranteeing you that I put a wall in place, or I'm guaranteeing you that I deliver a specific piece of engineering that is required. And because it's an outcome, I guarantee it on time and on quality. The second main attribute that differs is that the P&L items that I attack actually differ. So in software as a service, I attack relatively smaller P&L line items, usually 1 to 2, perhaps a little bit more percent of the P&L of a contractor, a building materials firm, a distributor, because that's where the software spend sits. And usually these line items are not as buy ready. Whereas in outcome as a service, I attack very large P&L line items, because you can think of it in a simplified way that 50% of the cost basis within the P&L of someone participating in the AECS industries will be labor and machinery. This differs by subsegment, and it's not universally true, but it's directionally correct. And so if I deliver a service, that's the cost that I attack, that's the line item, is 50%. So it's 50 to 25 times higher than if I try to sell only my software. And that is a buy-ready P&L line item. There's an established process for it, and the customer has been buying exactly that outcome for many, many years, right? The third one that is different between SaaS and outcome as a service is who's the purchaser. Well, in SaaS, it's oftentimes the back office. The purchasing decision gets delegated to the IT crew or gets delegated to someone in the headquarters. Whereas for outcome as a service, you're dealing with the front office. You're dealing with the people who deliver the projects, who manage the projects, who are on site, and who have to find some way to make the outcome happen. And that is actually a really good place to be purchased from, because these people are technical. They are exactly what selling software into a highly technical organization in any other vertical would be like, but the equivalent of that purchasing process within AECS is the front office. They are the technical people who know exactly what the outcome and service has to look like. And then finally, in SaaS, people will teach you, and the mantra that you will have to unlearn for AECS is they will teach you, hey, let's minimize the touch points. This is only scalable if we have as little human interaction as possible. And that is a terrible mindset for AECS. The way in AECS, due to all the risk factors that we have discussed in this episode, is to not minimize the human touch points, but to even inject engineering services, to inject customer support, because that delivers actually curation, it delivers track record, it delivers trust into the relationship. And beyond that, it allows you to actually sell larger baskets, to sell repeats, right? So in outcome as a service, I do not want to minimize my human touch points, which means that when you think of outcome as a service, the main think about it is P&L and purchasing. And here's an interesting anecdote that should differentiate between what are good outcomes as a service and what are not so good outcomes as a service. So I learned years ago that, for example, if you're a robotics company, you can sell as a subcontractor into an established P&L and purchasing process if, for example, you're putting a brick wall in place, because there is a established line item budgeted in the project for a subcontractor to erect the wall, and the purchasing process for that is defined. On the other end of the spectrum, if your robot is drilling holes into walls or ceilings, that's actually not as easy, because very few projects will have a P&L line item for the hole drilling. The P&L line item and the fidelity and granularity of the budget planning and thus the purchasing ends at the wall or the ceiling. So nobody will usually have an answer for, well, what am I ready to pay someone for hole drilling with their robot? Because it's not budgeted that way. And that means that the framework that we're using for the attributes of winners that use outcome as a service in AECS, founders and ventures that build this way that we're quite liking, our framework is that we look for P&L line items. What is the lowest P&L line item that is usually budgeted for in a project or in a process? And can you attack it with your solution, either a software or a hardware? Secondly, we want to see buy readiness. So if that exact outcome has already been purchased for many years, that usually means that the process is ready, that the governance internally is ready. And that means that you can have a very established motion to go after these types of projects and customers. And finally, everything we're saying here as outcome as a service does not mean we're looking not for software and hardware. Quite the opposite. We are looking for software and hardware technology. It's just you're not selling it. It's you're using it. But the outcome is what you're selling. And as a result of that, we have seen these companies that do commit to outcome as a service in AECS have very efficient distribution, oftentimes achieve 80 to 90% gross margins, and oftentimes are able to achieve early net profitability. And the venture money that we then bring in is not used to even find net profitability at scale, because that's proven, but in fact to scale the software, scale the hardware, make certain investments into new markets. And that's exactly what old school venture should be like. That's why founders should raise money. And the examples of such outcome as a service winners within AECS are abundant. In fact, VCs have loved the managed marketplace model for many years, and the managed marketplace model is the poster child of outcome as a service, because I am not selling software. I am using software internally to deliver the outcome of a material delivered on site, on time, on quality, or a machinery delivered on time, on quality, and on budget. And so managed marketplaces are, without people actually realizing it, the poster child example of outcome as a service within AECS. In our portfolio, we have backed multiple real hot marketplaces like Inframarket, like Metalbook, etc., etc., and it works. But beyond the marketplaces, robotics subcontractors work the same way. So in my portfolio, for example, an Amsterdam-based company called Monumental that builds brick walls with robotics does not sell the robot, it sells the brick wall. And that's the outcome. And it works. Energy audits, another example from our portfolio. Enter, a company that does exactly that, goes after large institutional asset holders as well as smaller holders of buildings and offers them the outcome of a full service audit of the energy substance of their building, and then delivers as a marketplace the renovation measures that you can do to get the building energetically upgraded and to also finance those measures. Again, outcome as a service. Engineering services are a great way to build such a company as well. Instead of building software, computer-aided design software, 2D design software, productivity software, and offer those to engineering bureaus or engineering companies, you can just become the next gen engineering service company powered by software. And finally, cloud installer models, basically models that train people to become their own craftsmen in a super standardized trade and process, and then allow them to become their own companies, but run on the software and the hardware and the purchasing and the brand of the cloud installer venture company. In my portfolio, VARM is such an example. And so this is how you can think about outcome as a service. We think it's a super interesting way of building the next 100 generational companies within AECS. And it's something that differentiates AECS and attacking it as a venture from many other sectors that have been here and work differently. That does not mean that SaaS does not have its place. It does, but it gives you an additional arrow in your quiver to think about building a legendary firm. And I'd love to see it. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you subscribe under aecvc.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. See you next time.